Hi, I'm Gernot Heiser. I'm professor for operating systems at UNSW and also researcher at Data61. And I'm not going to talk about a variety of projects, but one particular thing which I call uncompromising security. So normally security is known about being compromised, and we take an approach to uncompromised security, or radical, or fundamental, or whatever you want to call it, for connected devices and others. By the way, there was a discussion earlier about Apple phones and security there. In case you don't know, the security of your iOS devices, iPhones, iPads, whatevers, is maintained by a special security coprocessor, and that runs an operating system we developed about 10, 12 years ago. But that's yesterday's technology. I'm talking about today's. So this is very fundamental to our belief system. Is anything that's not proved trustworthy is untrustworthy. And if anyone who understands anything about software should agree with us. And we've had a lot of painful experience in that ourselves. And so to take some liberty with Dijkstra, testing, coding, inspection, etc., can only show that things are not trustworthy rather than they are. And the only way out is you need to prove it. Okay, it seems easier than said than done, and actually Dijkstra said that about 50 years ago, and things haven't made a lot of progress for 40 years. And in general, it's impossible to prove correctness of any significant size of software in a real-world system. However, any decent designed critical system has a structure that actually helps. And that means if you think of a critical device, be it a heart pacemaker or an aircraft or whatever, the really critical, mission critical, life critical functionality is, if this thing is well designed, is a relatively small component, relatively easy understood, maybe hopefully you can get it right. And then there's a whole lot of other stuff. So in the heart pacemaker example, the critical thing would be the little control loop that reads some sensor inputs and stimulates an electrode. A few hundred lines of code probably. In addition, there is wireless communication functionality, so the doctor can tune the thing without opening up the patient, and they can monitor operations, etc. And that's a huge, big software stack, which is likely to be quite buggy. You can get away with making a system like that secure. In practice, they're not. At the moment, if I needed a heart pacemaker, I would be worried. I had to hope that no one hates me enough to try to kill me, because you can do that without leaving a trace. But in principle, if the thing is well enough engineered and we have this separation, clear separation in critical and uncritical things, then what we can do in principle is put something really trustworthy underneath, which I call our SEL4 microkernel operating system, and that enforces strict isolation between those components. And of course, the reason why you have this different functionality is that it's not redundant, otherwise it wouldn't be on there, is it needs to somehow communicate with the critical bits. And this communication is very strictly controlled according to some overall system security or safety policy. And what this comes down to is you need a lowest software layer, your operating system kernel, which has basic isolation properties. The security experts tend to talk about the CIA properties: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. In safety critical devices, you have timeliness as well, because your heart pacemaker needs to react. Otherwise, if it only reacts after a day, the patient is dead. So there's some timeliness requirement. But fundamentally, you need to have an operating system that enforces isolation. And this is what we have built. So we have this SEL4 microkernel, which provably provides this isolation. What that means is it's implemented in a programming language. Any reasonable operating system is implemented in C. And then we have, in addition to this implementation, we have a mathematical model of the functionality of the system that describes in very precise terms how the system functions. And then we have a proof, a mathematical machine-checked, actually huge proof, that shows that the C code is a correct implementation of that specification. And in this very strict sense, the implementation is bug-free. That itself is not good enough, because what you're running on the hardware is not C, it's a compiled code. And so we have in addition proof that the code, the executable that runs on the hardware, is a correct translation of the C code. And now we have a proof chain that shows us that this, what actually runs on the hardware, is a correct implementation of this abstract specification. That itself is not enough either, because it doesn't tell us that the specification is any good. So in addition, we have further proofs that this model, which is described in this mathematical logic, is able to enforce these isolation properties. So it enforces confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And together, this means we have a complete proof chain that the code that runs on the hardware enforces this isolation, and this is what we need to build really truly secure systems. There's some exclusions at the moment, so I'm not trying to hide what hasn't been completely done. And they're actually really important, because what I said earlier about if it's not proven, it's not trustworthy. Actually, we really experience that. Every bit of code we haven't proven, we have found bugs. So we're working our way through proving the rest of these bits to make sure that the whole thing is actually bug-free. It's actually one of the interesting outcomes of this project is that we didn't have to compromise in performance either, and this is very close to our hearts. I tend to say security is no excuse for bad performance, because if you don't have decent performance in a system, people will not use it in practice, because if it's a mobile device, for example, you can't afford to throw away performance because that drains your battery too fast, which means if your heart pacemaker runs out of battery too quickly, you need to open up the patient earlier, etc. Stuff you don't want to do. And there's some safety properties we've shown as well. And this system actually is usable for real-world use, as we have shown in a DARPA-funded project under this DARPA HACMS program, which involves a bunch of unmanned aerial vehicles. We have a research vehicle, which we took an off-the-shelf airframe and replaced all the electronics and all the software. And then this is where our partner Boeing comes in. We have a real-world, full-size autonomous helicopter. This is an existing airframe, which Boeing is converting for autonomous flight, and where we are deploying this technology on. And in total, there's a collaboration involving 4 or 5 parties, where different people are contributing different things. So Galwa, which is a smallish company in Portland, Oregon, is producing the control code. Rockwell Collins is the integrator, but they also do analysis at the architecture level, and we provide the operating system software, and all that gets munched together on this UAVs. And DARPA actually hired a red team, which is a bunch of professional penetration testers. They do the hacking systems for a living, and their job was to try to break in. We have some untrusted code on the system, which we never expect to be able to make really secure, like a complete Linux system. We expected the red team to break into that, so we made their life easier by giving them administrator privileges on it, just to have a head start, and their job was to try to break out of this Linux system and affect any of the critical components of the system, and they couldn't. So the isolation enforced by our operating system really protected the critical assets of the system, and the red team didn't get anywhere. And DARPA called it the world's most highly assured drone, and that was even a year ago. And that it actually does work is shown here. This is a test flight of the autonomous helicopter conducted in Arizona last July. This is clipped from a Boeing PR video. But it actually does show the thing flying with SEL4 inside. Thank you very much.